Hello, everyone. Hello, Craig and Karen and Joan, Rob and Deb, Shell and Andrew. How you doing? Kay is there as well. So Shell's got her ratatouille and halloumi. Good work. I'll be very interested to see how it works because I thought it sounded like it might be a good match, but who knows? Spag bowl, olives, cheddar, some ham. That sounds like you've covered off a few bases there. Okay, hello, Cotty and John. Lovely to see you. Oh, it's very wintry all of a sudden, isn't it? Bit of a shock to the system. I've got my woolly jumper on and all the dogs are a bit toey. Richard's made me a fire though. Jill will be very upset when she gets back because I had to take her flowers off the mantelpiece because they were starting to look a little droopy. So we've got no flowers today, but we do have a fire and a Polly. Hi, Polly. Kay, I reckon that a glühwein or mullwein session could be quite fun, actually. Hello, Anne. How you going? Duck dumplings and ashbury. Yum. Delicious. Salmon Paul. Hurrah. Good to see you. Date night. Very exciting. Date night with a little bit of magic. I think Jeremy's going to join us tonight. He's getting himself organised, and as this is his baby, I'm hoping he'll be able to join us and join in on the chat a little bit. I'm not quite sure what's going on with my lighting here. Maybe it's just my face looking very washed out here, so I hope I don't look too dead to you guys. Craig, that's a very good point. The wine might need some air, so if you've got a decanter close at hand, you may even want to give it a bit of a decant, but otherwise we'll just get it open, slosh it in the glass, give it a good swirl and get it moving. Peter and Karen, potato chips. That's awesome. So Nigel also, who has just, hello Nigel, posing as Renee, has gone for the salted potato chips as per my recommendation. You were a little surprised, weren't you, Nigel, when I said chippies? But as long as I'm a big fan of salt and vinegar chips, but not with wine. The other flavours can go into somebody else's mouth, but good potato chips, fantastic. All Cotty, homemade sausage rolls from the freezer, fantastic. Not because lazy, because homemade sausage rolls on a chilly night like tonight with Magic Stalks would be perfect. All right, let's get this open and in the glass, particularly if Craig reckons it needs a bit of air. A little bottle shot, Magic Stalks Shiraz 2020. And while I'm getting this open, hello, Zach, Jack and Hannah. Lovely to see you. Let's get this wine in the glass. We had a lovely Easter Sunday lunch here. That was last week, wasn't it? I don't think I've seen you guys since then. The weeks are running into each other. It's all crazy. Here we go. Hey, look at that colour. That's beautiful. So as I was saying, hopefully Jeremy will be joining us. He's had a few things to do on his way home, but said that he'd try and log in and have a bit of a chat. I did invite him to stay, but weirdly he wanted to go home. Who knows why? Okay, so yes, it was lovely to see some of you at lunch on Sunday. And if you've been haranguing Jeff or waiting for the dates for the booking for the Pinot dinner that's coming up in May, we're getting ourselves organized. We've had so many people interested in it. We're trying to work out whether we just make it a bigger dinner with more people. Hello, Jeremy. Hello, Sue and Daryl. I'm just giving people a little preamble, Jeremy, about the Single Vineyard Pinot event in May. So we're going to have a meeting tomorrow. We're making some kimchi and we're going to good chance to make Jill sit down and listen to us while we're chopping things. Definitely better decanted, Craig. Okay, good. Good-o. Hey, Richard, would you mind getting me a decanter? Thank you. It's good having a lovely assistant, really. I'm just going to keep swirling this, but I might slosh it all into a decanter and back into the glass because it is looking a bit closed. Yes, Peter and Karen, to make kimchi. No, we've got too many kimchi makers already. But we're going to have a meeting with Jill. We're going to get things sorted, and I will be sending out an email with all the instructions and explanations and what's happening early next week. So watch this space. What else have people had to say? Okay. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
Even a relatively clean decanter.
Number two.
Number two. Okay, I'm going to do a very quick. This is a cheap decant. I've put it in my wine glass, and then I'm going to put it in the decanter, then put it back in there, and then I'm going to give Richard the decanter, and he can decant away if he would like to, because, you know, who's got time to decant on It's mid-May, Craig, but we may be doing something later as well. So anyway, I can't say anything else till I've spoken to Jill, because I need to get her okay on it. But obviously we've got more people who want to come to the event than we have spots for at the moment. So we're just working out how we fix it, which probably means we do a second one at some stage later in the year. Okay, there you go. Let the cat out of the bag. Don't tell anyone. So much better decanted, I agree, Craig. So that slightly stinky closed character that we got there sometimes happens with red wines, and you just need a little bit of air to get in there and open it up. This is such an interesting wine, and we've just made the 2022 version. Dad, could you just kind of put the bottle a little bit closer to, because I might need to refer to the label to remember how we made it. The beautiful thing, thank you very much. The lovely thing about the label is that it tells you all of the steps of what we did to it, which is quite intricate and silly. It is almost a completely different wine decanted, absolutely, Cotty. And I think that's a very good example of, that's why I didn't tell you to decant it, first of all. Oh, and you're on the 2019. Did we send you the wrong wine, or are you just using something that you had at home? I hope we didn't put the wrong wine in the box. We have, from time to time, been known to make a little mistake. So if we did, let me know and we'll rectify it. Leftover from Pry Box. Okay, good, excellent. The 19 is also delicious. So, and we've sold all of the 19. We had our last 2 cases on the shelf that we sold over Easter. Nigel did a big push on it. And I think Jeremy got 1 bottle and I got 1 bottle. So that's all of the museum stock that we've got. And bit soapy with the basil garnish. Perfect with the air-fried cauliflower. Oh, excellent, Shell. Yes, Craig, much more tannins and much drier than the previous vintage. So this is what I was going to talk about with this one particularly, because I think it's really interesting. And Jeremy, please feel free to chip in. This is Leo, my sister's dog, who's been having a sleepover with Jill and Richard for the last week. He came down from Newcastle in the car, and they've gone off catching up with all of their friends. So he came to have a bit of a stay with the grandparents. He's a little bit barky at the cats, so we've had a big conversation about it, and hopefully he'll behave himself while I'm talking to you guys. Otherwise, we'll have all the dogs on all of the Zoom. All of the dogs in your houses will be barking as well. Anyway, so Magic Stalks Shiraz. We started making this in 2019. So Anne's drinking the first vintage that we made. We're drinking the second vintage that we made. And this was a wine that we decided to make because we had some Shiraz fruit coming from the Osborne vineyard, which is a vineyard that we've been working with for a long time. Nearly 30 years, Dad? Anyway, we used to make wine for the Osborne family under their label. And then when they decided they didn't want to make that wine anymore, we said to them we'd like to lease the vineyard and take the fruit. We share the lease with 10 Minutes by Tractor, so they take some of the fruit, we take the other, about half of the fruit. And there was this little bit of Shiraz that they had planted, which was just kind of a bit of an irritation to us. And Dad and Jeremy every year said, "Oh, let's graft it over to Pinot." And it kept getting sort of put down the list of priorities every year. It never happened. So in 2019, it was quite a nice vintage. The fruit was ripening well. And Jeremy said, why don't we pick it? And why don't we make a Shiraz out of this fruit and see what we can do with it? Our Shiraz that we make here from the McIntyre vineyard fruit is a single vineyard wine that Dad does a whole bunch ferment on, which you guys know about. We're going to have a look at the new vintage probably in the next box. Also, the next box will be finalised in the next day or two, and we'll send you out an email about that too. So I'll come back to that at the end of the session. Let me finish talking. I'm just distracting myself. This wine, hello Jeff, how you going? You just caught me blathering. This wine, Jeremy said, why don't we do something different with this parcel of fruit? And we said, like what? And so the Magic Stalks Shiraz became this sort of, let's do something different with Shiraz, little kind of carbonic maceration, partial time on stalks, part-time off stalks. It's a really interesting wine because we've been playing around with what the stalks in the wine can do for the wine, which is why we called it Magic Stalks. First of all, the stalks, when we started off, the stalks in the bunches kept the grapes completely sealed, because when you take the grape off the stalk, you have a little hole in the grape and yeast can get in and juice can get out through that hole. If you leave the grapes on the bunch and they're in really good condition, then you've got perfect grapes with no hole, no access in through the skin to the juice and the sugar in the grape. So yeast can't start fermenting the wine in a normal way. That's the first magical thing about stalks in winemaking. So we put those whole bunches in a big plastic bag and sealed it up and let some carbonic maceration happen. And Jeremy's just saying that the 2020 that we're tasting here was picked a little earlier than perhaps the 2019 and a little early in general for Shiraz and Shiraz ripeness. So we have a wine that had a lot of acid at the point and early spectrum fruit. So the acid and tannin work together to sort of accentuate each other, and the early fruit looks less jammy, more savoury and less sweet. And so he was saying that that's why it works so well with the oily, fatty cauliflower dried, air-fried flavours that you've got there, Shell. So yes, Cotty, no crushing at this stage. Whole bunches into bags. They're big bags, but they're quite small for fruit. So they're in sort of 1 ton picking baskets with the bags in them, sealed up so no oxygen can get in. We've covered them with CO2 before we seal them up, so there's just CO2 in the bag with the grapes, and this means that a thing called carbonic maceration starts, which is a type of sort of pre-fermentation where the sugars in the grape start breaking down inside the grape. So it's not a yeast-derived fermentation, but the sugars in the grape start to break down and become alcohol inside the grape, and that gives you a very distinctive aroma flavour in the wine, and that's what we look for with carbonic maceration. One of the reasons that this wine doesn't look as sweet, as well as the fact that the fruit was picked, as Jeremy's quite rightly pointed out, this wine didn't have as much carbonic maceration influence in 2020 as compared to the 19. It's there, but it's not as... So carbonic maceration gives a kind of lolly shop kind of red skin, bubblegummy kind of lifted aroma to the wine. So the 2019, if you're looking at that, should have a little bit more of that sweet shop bubblegummy kind of character. The 2020 is more savoury and has less of that character, partly because the bags didn't get as warm and it's important for carbonic maceration to really work, for the fruit to get quite warm while it's in that situation. Also, the amount of time that you leave it, I think in 2019 we sort of we left it for a bit longer than we really planned to, but that actually turns out to be the better thing to have done if you want more carbonic maceration character in it. So we're just playing around with the two different styles. So yeah, so the 2019 was 13%, and this one 12.5. So yeah, slightly less ripe, more red fruit, and as Jeremy says, regardless of the sugar and therefore resultant alcohol, the fruit spectrum is earlier expression of fruit. So more red fruit, less black fruit. So when we're talking about Shiraz, when less ripe Shiraz, often really low ripeness Shiraz can have some capsicum vegetal characters, some black pepper. Then it goes through red plum, black cherry, and then sort of all of those fruits in a dried fruit and then a jam kind of profile when you're somewhere like Barossa Valley where it's really hot and the fruit gets baked. We don't get those characters in our Shiraz even in a riper, longer fruit hanging year than this wine. But this is we're really interested in exploring those red plum kind of fruit characters and even some sort of red cherry fruit characters. And I think you can see that on the nose of this wine, even though it's got, it does have that sort of more savory character. It's not that sort of cooked fruit character. It's more like fresh fruit. And I'm getting some of that bubblegummy carbonic maceration character coming through now, which I think is nice. There was more in the 19, but there's certainly some still here in the 20. Good with the dumplings, better with the ash brie. It's really interesting, isn't it, Anne? Because you kind of mightn't think that brie is a great combination with Shiraz, but I think that ash would bring in an extra sort of textural characteristic that would go really well with kind of the crunchy red fruit character of this wine. As it's opening up, and it's opening up really nicely. So if you didn't have a decanter to decant it into, just keep swirling it, keep getting air into it. You can either, if you've got a big enough hand and your hand's clean, if you just put hand cream on your hand or hand sanitizer or something, don't do this. But you can actually put your hand right on top of the glass. If you see there, I've sealed it completely with my palm. You don't want to have any holes you don't want to have your fingers over it or anything, because then you'll get holes and then you'll end up with wine on top of yourself. But you can give it a bit of a shake like that. And then if it kind of shakes up to the top, it just goes on your hand. You're going to then deal with wine on your hand, but then you can be really elegant and lick it, or wipe it on your pants, or wipe it on the person next to you, or just rub it into your hands like hand cream. Beautiful. So that'll get a little bit of air into it as well. And it's even better. Again, I can smell sort of the raspberry fruit and the red plum coming up really beautifully. And the dog. Did the Osborne Shiraz ripen sufficiently this year? Yeah, absolutely, Rob and Deb. We picked. Oh yes, the dog, absolutely. And I don't have a dog next to me to wipe my hand on, but that's a very good hand wiper. Dogs, particularly poodles, they're very absorbent. Rob and Deb, the Osborne Shiraz ripened beautifully this year. We picked it 3 weeks ago, and Jeremy and Mario destemmed it day before yesterday, which was very exciting. So we've only got to the carbonic maceration part of the process. That's in the closed bags with nothing happening to it, but just it kind of bubbling away to itself inside the berries. Then we open the bags up to kind of after, well, in this circumstance, maybe after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then we have a look at it. What did Jeremy do next? I think he walked around on top of it, bit of foot stomping to kind of break up the berries and get the juice out into the sort of container out of the grapes, so that a normal fermentation would start. And that starts very fast if it hasn't already, because it's very hard to have perfect fruit that doesn't leak at all. So you'll have a little bit of normal fermentation happening at the bottom of the bag anyway. As soon as you let the oxygen in, then that'll take off quite quickly. Stomping on it helps even more. And then soon after that, Jeremy likes to destem it partway through the fermentation, which is not very traditional winemaking, and when we actually didn't invent this. We borrowed the technique from another winemaker down here on the Mornington Peninsula, Simon Black, who makes wine for Montalto. I think it was Simon's idea originally. Anyway, but there's a few of us kind of playing around with destemming mid-fermentation rather than at the end of fermentation. And what we're trying to do there is minimise the amount of bitter stalk tannins that get sucked into the wine. So we don't want the wine to spend too much time soaking on those stalks. What the stalks do once the juice is out of the grapes and sloshing around and fermenting, then you're first of all pulling out of the skins and the stalks the tannins and flavours that dissolve in an aqueous solution, because when you start, you've got water and sugar in the grapes, so that's an aqueous solution. But as the sugar gets eaten by the yeast and you get alcohol as a result, then you're pulling out other compounds from the stalks and the skins, which dissolve in an alcoholic solution. And we find that the longer we leave the wine on the stalks while it's fermenting, the more of those kind of quite firm, sometimes a little bitter tannins come out of the stalks, which is great if you've got really kind of big, dark, rich fruit and it can handle that. But with a wine like this that has that kind of more red-fruited, more lifted, more medium-bodied style, we don't want those really heavy tannins in there. So that's why we destemmed partway through the fermentation rather than leaving the wine on stalks for the whole fermentation. Once we destemmed it, we let it finish fermenting, and then it went to some old barrels, and then it got bottled. So lots of things going on. So the second part of the Magic Stalks concept is how the flavour of the stalks affect the flavour of the wine while the wine's actually, after the wine's finished its carbonic maceration and we've let the juice out of the berries, and the juice is taking flavours out of the stalks as well as out of the skins during the fermentation. So the magic is what the stalks give to the wine, and also the magic of taking the stalks away partway through so that we're controlling the tannins and we're controlling the shape of the wine by removing the stalks at exactly the right moment, which is always kind of part of the fun. I haven't had a chance to put the wine in my mouth yet because I've been too busy talking about magic. Does it taste any good? Let's have a taste. Everyone's gone quiet, so I'm either being really interesting or you've got bored and started talking to each other and are enjoying just eating and drinking. I love this wine on the palate because it's really red fruited, and I talk about crunchy fruit, and what I mean by that is that earlier picked fruit, it reminds me of plums that when you pick them off the tree and you bite into them, the flesh is still crunchy and they have that sort of tangy acid, and they're not as sweet and plush as a really super ripe plum. It's got that really lovely kind of sort of crunchy tree fruit character to them. Okay, Rob and Deb, I'll answer that in a moment. Cotty, so Jeremy's, okay, so we're talking about the 2022. So I'll read that out in a minute, Jeremy. So Cotty, once the wine was destemmed, we left it in a fermenter to finish fermenting, and then we basket pressed it and sent the wine to a single old barrel. So we don't, so Jeremy's saying third fill barrel, so not much oak influence, not much oak flavour, a little oak tannin, but also it just lets the wine sort of breathe a bit and helps the tannins to polymerise, which means that the bigger tannins join up and then fall out of the wine before we bottle it. It just makes the wine that old barrel slight breathability is really good for red wine, just kind of smoothing it out a little bit before you put it in bottle. Now, Jeff, I'm going to disagree with you. Spaghetti Bolognese is not built for Pinot. I don't agree at all. I think that heavy Shiraz, as Kay said, is not great with Spag Bog. I think a wine like this is terrific with Spag Bog, as you say, because it's got all that red fruit and it works with the tomato side of the Spag Bol as well as the meaty style. But if you're not drinking Magic Stalks with your Spag Bol, I have a real preference for having Sangiovese with Spag Bol, something like that Poggio Chianti Classico that we had last year. I think it's delicious. But everyone has different taste in food and wine matches, and that's why it's so. I might not agree with putting Pinot Noir with Spag Bol, but Jeff loves it. And so, you know, that can work really well. Kay usually has a Tempranillo. So I think that's pretty interesting. Most food items, Jeremy says, that have worked with this wine, including tonight's items, have fat in them. I would add to that also tomato, in the same way that tomato-based things seem to go really well with our Pinot Gris. I think that this wine, because of its savouriness and because of its red, crunchy fruit, and sort of slight lifted character, it copes better with tomato in food than a lot of other Shirazes and Pinot Noirs, to my mind. So, but yes, definitely needs some fat. So for your Spag Bol, bit of olive oil, bit of Parmesan cheese, and do really, really good things. So now, Jeremy, everything's moving so fast. We've talked about Spag Bol too much. I didn't read out your information about the 2022, which I think is really interesting, because this wine is an experimental wine, and we're, you know, still working on how we want to make it to get the most out of the fruit. And so this year in 2022, we had a few changes. We warmed the bags up for 2 weeks. Rather than leaving them at an ambient temperature, we're going to give them more time on skins, 3 to 4 times more post-fermentation maceration. So that's the plan. The fruit has done its carbonic maceration for 2 weeks in a heated room, so that's going to really kind of hopefully dial up the carbonic maceration character in the wine in 2022. But then now that we've destemmed it, it's going to spend quite a longer, 3 to 4 times longer on skins post-fermentation before we press it off and send it to barrel. So that will bring out some different flavours and skin tannins, which are very different from stalk tannins. So again, Magic Stalks versus skins, I think it'll be really interesting to see how that works. Tempranillo with Spaghetti Bol, fine. I can tell you that it won't be Moorooduc Estate Tempranillo, because we're not planning on planting any Tempranillo anytime soon. Although Richard is just working up to committing to some Nebbiolo. I think we're pretty much convinced that a little bit of Nebbiolo in the Moorooduc McIntyre vineyard is going to be a good thing in the future. So, Shell, sea salt potato chips. And I got into trouble last year or the year before from someone when I said do have plain salted potato chips with wine, and they're like, oh, that's not really a very good wine food match. And I think the salty, fatty, potatoey-ness of potato chips and the crunch as well seems to work really, really well with a wine like this. So I think it's a terrific food and wine match. Warming the bags, Peter and Karen, I believe, and Jeremy can correct me on this if I get this wrong, but I believe we're warming the bags because we've done a bit of extra research into the best way to do a carbonic maceration. And if we want to get those real kind of lifted, bubblegummy, lolly shop aromas in the wine, you get better carbonic maceration character if you warm the bags. Okay, warm bags means that the enzymes doing the carbonic maceration work much better at a higher temperature, around 30 to 32 degrees, much more Cab-Mac influence, much more efficient at doing their thing. Thank you, Jeremy. Sous vide grapes, exactly, Craig. We're doing a bit of sous vide on them before we let them ferment normally. So I think we'll find, well, we don't know what we're going to find with the 2022. It's part of the fun of the of just kind of playing with the winemaking. But the idea is to try and get a little bit more of that Cab-Mac character, that bubblegummy lift perfume to the wine. And maybe leaving it on skins for longer, Jeremy, is that to get a little bit more tannin structure in the palate, or what's your thinking about that? While I wait for you to type that answer, it's good when we have Jeremy to answer questions. Jeff, the way we keep the bags at a constant temperature is that we put them in a sealed room that we have a refrigeration unit on, but instead of turning the refrigeration on, we stuck a heater in with it. So because it's sealed and because it holds its temperature, whatever temperature we make it, it's quite a good way to keep the bags at a constant temperature. Vertical potato chip tasting. Well, Shell, we could still do that. And I was actually thinking, funnily, you should mention that might be a fun thing to do next week with our Devil Bean Creek Pinot Noir, because we've had the Devil Bean Creek Pinot Noir a few times, and I thought if we got a few different crunchy snacks, some potato chips and maybe some corn chips, maybe some pretzels, those kind of things, maybe even some nuts if you're feeling like going crazy, we could have a bit of fun with crunchy snacks with the Pinot Noir next week. So if people like the idea of that, then we'll confirm that. Oh, this wine's now starting to smell of cinnamon, like those. I don't know anyone who's tried some American sweets. They love putting cinnamon in their gum and things like chewing gum and stuff like that. It's got a real kind of cinnamon sweet kind of character to it. Craig, different strands of mushrooms. That's not a bad idea. So Jeremy. Longer skins, more silky polymerized tannins, thank you, and a little bit more weight in the middle. So maybe next week we can have a potato chip taste off and a mushroom taste off, Craig. So then we can be sort of grown-ups and kids at the same time. Jeremy's got his veggie spring rolls in the deep fryer currently. Good on you. How fantastic. Okay, cinnamon in the spag bowl. See, it brings out... It's really interesting, and I think that was. I'm sorry that Shell's ratatouille didn't really work with the wine, but I thought that the cumin and coriander that you put in ratatouille could also bring out some of the spice in this Shiraz, but it is more cinnamony than anything else at the moment, which I think is pretty interesting. Might work with a not too spicy chili. With cinnamon in it. All right, dogs, you've been really good, but just shush for a little bit longer because I haven't quite finished. Thank you. Polly's gone that way, Leo's gone that way. There's something going on. Anyway, the other thing that I love about this wine is that when it leaves your mouth, instead of kind of leaving a heavy kind of flavour, the flavour's quite lifted and red fruited, and it's really refreshing. And I think, as Jeremy has been saying, if you've got something with a little bit of fat in it to sort of counteract that, then that could work. Could work really, really well. Peter says the freeze-dried mushroom chips, best of both worlds. Well, in fact, if you happen to have a decent IGA near you, there are those, they bring in these French potato chips that are mushroom flavored. Jill's back. That's why the dogs are back. Hello, Jill. So Nigel's asking about polymerized tannins. And I'll send out a link to the fancy potato chips, the mushroom flavored potato chips. They're pretty delicious. So Nigel, polymerized tannins, that's sort of what I was talking about when you age red wine in a barrel before you're putting it into a bottle. What tannins will do in solution is the bigger ones will tend to join together, and that's called polymerization. And anyone who's a chemist, please excuse my very simplistic explanation here. But what happens when the smaller tannins join up to make bigger, longer tannin chains is that you get more tannin weight in the mid-palate, but they're silkier and more appealing texturally. And the really big chunky ones, when they get too big, then they just fall out of solution. They get too heavy and they fall out of solution, and they are no longer in the wine. So you get better tannin texture with tannin polymerization. It's one of the reasons that cheaper red wine that's been made faster than wine that's had longer on skins and longer in barrel before it gets bottled is kind of less smooth than higher quality red wine. The CB has finally raised its head. Craig, I don't understand your jargon. You'll have to spell it out for me. Mac, yes, absolutely. Thank you. I thought that might have been what you were saying. And it has, as the air has got into this wine, the Mac's getting more obvious in the wine. And I think that's really interesting. The other thing to take note of is that wines made like this using carbonic maceration are wines that are made to drink early and not really wines that are made to go in the cellar for a long time. But that said, this is 2020 that we're drinking in 2022, so it's still quite a young wine. And I think that little bit of bottle age has helped it sort of be a more complex wine than it was when we first released it. And I think it's helped that carbonic maceration with time to sort of integrate and show itself a little bit more in the wine, because I think that probably some of the tannins and the savouriness of the fruit has just softened off just a tiny bit. So I'm actually, I don't know about you, Jeremy, but I'm enjoying this wine even better today than I did last time I had it, which was late last year. I think it might just be the day, might just be my mood, might have been what I paired with it food-wise, but I think that it doesn't need a long bottle age, and in fact, I would say drink this over the next 6 to 12 months. But I think that little bit of time has helped it kind of find its balance as well. So thank you, Jeremy. We're in total agreement. There's also a little chocolate-covered licorice kind of sweet aroma to this. Like when I was talking about lolly shops and I was talking about sort of bubble gum, there's also, molasses licorice covered in milk chocolate. There's that kind of aromatic there as well, which is coming up more and more. That's also the Cab Mac character coming through, which I think is really appealing. And it doesn't mean that the wine needs to be paired to sweet things. I don't think it does at all. But I think that lifted perfume just kind of gives you a bit more interest. There's a little bit of pepper, a little bit of black pepper kind of coming up now as well, as that sort of hot cinnamon and chocolatey licorice. All sorts of good fun stuff. Yeah, not really salty licorice or anything like that, Craig. Sort of like the Daryl Lee licorice, really kind of sweet, mild licorice. Yeah, nice. Well, team, I think we've probably given that wine a pretty good go. It's drinking really nicely. I think it'll keep quality licorice. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to keep evolving in the glass. So if you've still got some in your decanter or in your bottle, don't rush it. Have it with your dinner. Enjoy the way it opens up in the glass. But again, it's so different from our other Shiraz that we make, which is much darker, more structural, needs other foods to go with it. I think it's a really interesting wine. Again, I should remind you that we only made one barrel of this wine, and I think I kind of I mentioned this last year, but just for anyone who missed that, we only make a barrel of it is because we only get that much fruit from the Osborne vineyard. So there's nothing that we can do to increase the quantity. And I just remembered that I didn't answer Rob and Deb's question about the difference between the Osborne Shiraz and the McIntyre Shiraz. It's partly the way the vineyard's set up, it's partly the age of the vines, and it's partly the way when we harvest it. So this was harvested at a less ripe level than the Shiraz from the McIntyre vineyard, and the flavours that we get from the McIntyre vineyard fruit tends to be more black pepper spice, darker fruit, and then that's accentuated by the fact that we do a whole bunch fermentation and that the wine's made in a slightly more kind of serious conventional way. So it's partly vineyard fruit character, but it's also the way we handle it, both when we pick it and how we handle it in the winery, that is different. We will drink just about 10% of the total production. Absolutely, Jeremy. So it is one of those wines that we decided to make mainly for, Drinks with Kate and for Wine Club. It's not going to be a wine that you can buy all year round. We'll release it. We'll taste it. You can buy it, and then it's pretty much gone until next year. So it's a fun little collector's item. I think it's pretty delicious. Jeff's enjoying it as well. And you prefer it to the 2019, Jeff. I think that's really interesting. That sort of sour cherry fizzy lolly, definitely Nigel's talking about. So lots of things going on. Bit calmer. It's just a lovely one, and it's revealing itself quite slowly. So, give it, if you haven't squaffed it all by now, give it a bit more time and let it keep evolving. Get your vegetarian spring rolls out of the deep fry, Jeremy, and enjoy the party. That sounds pretty awesome. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it here. I will just say I haven't forgotten about box 3. I did mention it at the beginning of the session. I haven't forgotten about box 3. We're going to take a couple of weeks break between the end of this box and the start of the next box, just 2 weeks, 3 maximum. And we will do a cocktail or a beer or something on one of those evenings. But we're just finalising what we're going to put in the next box to make it interesting, make it fun, make it delicious, and we'll send that offer out probably very early next week, I'd say. We also haven't forgotten that we promised to offer you some of the 2015 Robinson Pinot. That offer will be going out either tomorrow or at the same time as the box. It's been really busy here. It's crazy, but everyone's busy. So I'm not making excuse. I'm just saying I'm getting onto it. And I hope that you all can stay nice and warm and cozy. Enjoy your Magic Stalks Shiraz. Enjoy the magic that those stalks have created. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you next week. And if you like the idea of the potato chip tasting, we'll do that. I might give you a couple of options for next week, but I think it'll be fun to play with the Devil Bean Creek Pinot with a few different food explorations. So I'll work on that over the weekend and come up with something brilliant by Monday. All right, guys, cheers. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you all again next week. Love you all.